What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris and this is 4K Motoring. If you guys can't tell, it is winter in North Carolina. It is almost New Year's and it is getting cold outside. Because of that, although my Ducati is pretty well optioned for cold weather riding, Nicole's MT-03 is definitely not. What we've got is a set of these Oxford Universal Sports Heated Grips. We're going to install those real quick, see how they work out, see how easy it is to install just so you can do it yourself. Alright, what we got here is a set of the Oxford Heaterz Premium Sports Heated Grips. Let's go ahead and see what's included here. This should be everything you need to add heated grips to your motorcycle. And from what I've read online, this has one of the best overall controllers in here that will time out and not let your bike basically drain its own battery or overheat. Makes it pretty easy to use. Let's go ahead and see how easy it is to install. You've got your two heated grips, your battery connector, your heat controller, your throttle tube grips, your clutch side grips, and then some mounting hardware. So obviously we're gonna have to get to the battery. So your first step, MT-03 or not, you're gonna have to find where your battery is, probably under your seat. For the MT-03, it's gonna take an 8mm to get these two seat bolts out. Once you get to the actual battery itself, which is where you're gonna be hooking up the wiring leads to these heated grips, we're gonna go ahead and start disassembling any sort of fairing that's gonna be needed to hide wiring, which we've done before if you've watched the underglow video. And then we're gonna start taking these old grips off. For that, most of these bikes are gonna have some sort of bar ends, which are basically the weights that go on the outside of the grips here. For the MT-03, it's gonna require just a 5mm hex to go into it. We're gonna remove those and we're gonna peel these old grips off, then we can work on installing the new ones. So once we have our bar ends off, we're gonna go ahead and work on getting these grips off. They are glued on by the factory. Anytime you install new grips, they should have some grip glue on them, so they're gonna be almost impossible to roll up and pull off realistically, especially when it's a little bit colder out. So what I recommend is usually taking a razor blade and slicing just a groove in the center so you can peel them open, and then work your way around to get these grips off. Once that's done, we have the old grips off. We can clean up some of this old glue off these handlebars and be ready to install our new heated grips. So on the MT-03 specifically, it may not be the same on your bike. The throttle tube here had some extrusions on it, basically some pieces of plastic sticking out that made it larger than the 1-inch diameter that this tube was, just to make sure that the grip stayed mechanically locked on, not just reliant on glue. So pretty good design feature for just regular grips, but it's not going to work for our heated grips. And something explicitly stated in the manual for these Oxford grips is that if you do have a tube with anything on it, you have to smooth it down. Easy work with a Dremel. If you guys don't have one, highly recommend for any DIY stuff, getting a Dremel yourself. We're going to double check that this is right at 1-inch diameter. All right, I think that's probably close enough there. How about back a little bit closer? All right. Okay. So I think we're within an inch, close enough that this is going to slide on. They recommend a dry fit test first. They should be able to slide on completely and move a little bit without a whole lot of friction. You don't want to break the inside of these grips. And then when you're ready, you can apply the quick setting glue. It does dry very quickly. You have to be ready to act as soon as you put it on. But let's go ahead and clean these things off and get these new grips test fitted just to make sure everything works out. Okay, so we have just test fit everything in place. We have our battery leads wired up, positive and negative. Again, make sure you be careful when you put these things on that you don't short anything out. But there's an inline fuse included in the wiring harness. Black to negative, red to positive, obviously. Find a way to run these through that they're not gonna touch any moving parts, so no suspension pieces. Make sure they don't touch anything super hot. Kind of follow an existing wiring loom all the way through the bike, and we'll have it come up there. Temporarily, we just have them all connected right here next to the bike. We do have our grips test fit on. They're not glued in yet. They just slide in and out and you can rotate them slightly. It is pretty easy. We did mount our controller here. It gives you this metal bracket. Honestly, on the MT-03, there wasn't a good spot. It normally wants you to use something like this, but on the throttle side, one, it's pretty hard to use. Two, it'd be blocking the start-stop switch. We don't want to do that. We just used a single bolt from the mirror mount, the clutch mount on the clutch side. That way you can kind of just reach over and hit the plus and minus from it. You can see it light up. It does come with some double-sided adhesive. That way if you find some just flat spot on your bike, if you don't have handlebar space, you can mount it to that, and it does work pretty well. Now that everything's tested and working, both grips do start to heat up pretty well. We're going to go ahead and put some glue on, permanently mount these things, get those bar ends back, and hide all the wires. Hopefully we'll be done with this in the next couple minutes. And taking right about an hour to install, we are done. The bike is back together. We are making sure the glue is nice and dry before we go ride it, but we do have the grips glued on and attached permanently. There is a note on the instruction manual of how to mount particularly the throttle side grip, to make sure that there's no interference with the cord and the throttle. Mostly I want to make sure we can grip the throttle fully and not hit this bump right here, this raised section. Same on the clutch side. And for the clutch side, you want to make sure that this is turned in a way that this bump here is not going to interfere with your ability to pull the clutch back and cause an unsafe scenario. So make sure when you're test fitting you have that nailed down and you don't have a problem. So far they look great. Everything looks pretty official. I don't really think there's any issues with fit or finish with any of this stuff. It looks very much like it could be a factory option. As I said, we do have our main heater here, or intelligent heat controller. There is a battery saving mode that this comes equipped with. The way I understand it from the instruction manual is that it will detect either a drop in voltage from your battery. If your battery gets down to 11.5 volts or less, that way it knows the bike's off, it doesn't kill your battery. Or if there is 2 minutes uninterrupted of no voltage noise, as in no fluctuation in the current that it's receiving, it will shut itself off. And that should pretty well tell when the bike is off. That way you can just set it and forget it. In the event you leave it on, it's not going to kill your battery, which is awesome. One thing I will note is that with any heated grips, if you've not used them before, if you leave it on high and take your hands off, as in your body's not helping to absorb some of that heat, you can burn out the elements in here, the heating elements. So make sure you take care of that. Otherwise, again, just make sure that you have fully tucked up all of the cords. Make sure they're all run kind of with whatever cords are already on your bike. That's usually a pretty safe direction to run them. I, on the MT-03, took it under the left side of the bike back to the battery, all zip tied up. Plenty of cable. Really everything you need for this job is included. There's not a lot of wiring skills or any other fancy skills you need or experience. Very happy with the overall temperature of these grips. They do great. I think this is going to make this a much more rideable bike, being a naked with no wind protection to speak of really. This will make it a little bit easier to get out on the road through a wider range of seasons. Again, with that, make sure you have the appropriate equipment for that. Make sure you have warm gear, gloves included. Make sure you have tires that are not super sport tires that require a certain temperature to get warmed up enough to use. And enjoy your bike all year long. If any of you guys have experience with these Oxford grips, let me know good or bad how they've been for you. So far I've really liked the fit and finish and the ease of installation. Hopefully they last a long time. I've been using the factory Ducati ones now for about a decade on different bikes. Been happy with those. They are incredibly hot. So really interested to see how these hold up and how they do long term. If you guys have used a different brand or have different experience with heated grips, let me know. These things are magical and I'd highly recommend them on any bike. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching 4K Motoring. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and like this video. We'll catch you next time.